Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, August 14, 2024. Inflation report for July shows the consumer price index increased versus last year 2.9%, first time under 3% since 2021. Republican presidential nominee, former President Donald Trump, blames Iran for hacking his campaign and praises the FBI's investigation. President Joe Biden meets with online content creators and influencers, telling them the biggest thing you've got going for you, and I hope you keep it, is you're trusted, and it makes a difference. We will talk with USA Today Congress and campaigns reporter Ken Tran about Tuesday's election primary results, including a U.S. House Squad member in Minnesota surviving a Democratic challenge, and a millionaire businessman winning the Republican Senate nomination in Wisconsin to take on the Democratic incumbent, seen by some as vulnerable. Japan's prime minister makes a surprise announcement that he will resign next month. Israel-Hamas ceasefire talks are scheduled to begin on Thursday, but it's uncertain whether Hamas will be there. And on this anniversary of the 1908 race riot in Springfield, Illinois, the White House says President Biden will create a national monument to remember that deadly event. Story at Market Watch. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden touted progress in the fight against inflation after Wednesday's Consumer Price Index report and previewed campaign trail arguments for later this week. Large corporations are sitting on record profits and not doing enough to lower prices, Biden said in a statement. Harris, who's preparing to take on former President Donald Trump in the November election, is scheduled to give an economic policy speech on Friday in North Carolina. Her campaign said in a statement she will lower costs by taking on greedy corporations that are overcharging consumers, ban hidden fees, and cap unfair rent increases and prescription drug costs. Donald Trump is scheduled to give a speech on the economy in North Carolina on Wednesday afternoon. In a statement, his campaign said the U.S. cannot afford another 4 years of Kamala's failed economic policies. The Consumer Price Index increased 0.2% last month, the government said Thursday. The measure had fallen in June for the first time since 2020. The 12-month rate of inflation slowed to 2.9% from 3% and touched the lowest level since the spring of 2021. That was from Market Watch. Senator J.D. Vance, Republican of Ohio, the vice presidential nominee, spoke about inflation and Vice President Kamala Harris today at a family-owned industrial hauling business in Byron Center, Michigan.
She inflicted the American people with the worst affordability and inflation crisis in generations. Now, this is not rocket science, my friends. When inflation happens, when the government spends and prints money that we don't have, that makes your hard-earned money worthless. And that makes Kamala Harris directly responsible for this inflation disaster because she cast the tie-breaking vote on nearly $2 trillion in reckless spending. Not just that, she then cast another tie-breaking vote on a radical left-wing spending wish list, which spent millions and billions of dollars on green energy scams. That was another couple $1 trillion. And while they weakened the dollar, Biden and Harris cracked down on American energy. That is a recipe for the terrible affordability crisis that we have on this country. You combine that with the regulatory agenda, you combine the energy problems, you combine the trillions of dollars in reckless spending, and you have got inflation into the stratosphere. Now, instead of buying energy from every dictator around the globe, which is what Kamala Harris wants to do, under President Trump, we're going to embrace a very simple principle. We're going to get American energy from American workers and American territory. We are going to drill, baby, drill. That's going to cut down prices, and that's going to create a lot of prosperity for the American people. Now, Kamala Harris and her Democrat friends, they didn't just shut down American energy, print trillions of dollars, they also extended, we forget this, the economy-crushing lockdowns, and then they overran the country with tens of millions of illegal aliens. Now, you bring in 30 million people and you weaken the dollar, that is how you get the inflation crisis that we have. Now, here just in Michigan, and it's similar in Ohio, and it's similar in a lot of states across the Midwest, the average family is spending $1,000 more a month just to buy what they were buying 4 years ago. That's $12,000 a year just to live the same normal middle-class life. And have wages gone up $12,000 under Kamala Harris? No, they haven't. So I ask a very simple question. President Trump asked it just a couple of days ago. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Absolutely not. So let's bring Donald Trump back, right? It's that simple.
Senator J.D. Vance, Republican of Ohio, and the Republican vice presidential nominee today in Byron Center, Michigan, at Cordis Incorporated, an industrial hauling company. President Joe Biden with a statement about the July Consumer Price Index, or CPI, from the Labor Department that begins. Today's report shows that we continue to make progress fighting inflation and lowering costs for American households. Inflation has fallen below 3%, and core inflation has fallen to the lowest level since April 2021. We have more work to do to lower costs for hardworking Americans, but we are making real progress with wages rising faster than prices for 17 months in a row. The president answered a reporter's question today about inflation. It was at a White House event on a different subject. Digital content creators and influencers were stopping by.
Has the U.S. beat inflation, Mr. President?
Yes. I told you we're going to have a soft landing. We're going to have a soft landing. My policies are working. Start writing that way, okay?
And Mr. President,
anyway, thank you.
President Biden at the White House at the Creator Economy Conference. About 100 digital content creators there. We'll have more from that event coming up later in this program. First, more on the inflation report from the White House briefing. Jared Bernstein, chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, taking reporters' questions.
Does the White House at this point think that the inflation problem is solved?
The momentum is certainly in the right direction. Inflation is reliably coming down. We have a record of disinflation, meaning slower inflation, that is now 60% or a little bit more than that off of its peak. And so this is a consistent trend that's been moving in the right direction. No victory laps, as I tried to assert in my comments. Our work is not done, because even as we get inflation back down to pre-pandemic levels, we still have to be mindful that too many families are facing too many high costs. And in the area of healthcare, childcare, housing, junk fees, prescription drugs, healthcare coverage, in every one of those areas, the president and vice president are taking aggressive action, not just to keep inflation on this lower path, but also to ensure that we're cutting costs wherever we can. At the same time, we're very mindful of the fact that as inflation has come down as far as it has, over 6 percentage points on the CPI, that the job market remains solid and that real wages are growing, not just this month, but on a year-over-year basis for 17 months in a row for middle and lower wage workers.
Thank you.
It was raised just now. Thank you very much for being here. So is that how you would explain why, when I talk to voters in the field, when my colleagues talk to people, they still don't think the economy is in a better shape than it was when President Biden first took office?
Well, I don't know about that in terms of the broader economic, assessment of where the, the economy is, because, I think people do know that the job market's been strong, 16 million jobs, that's record job growth. The unemployment rate has been historically low. GDP growth has been strong. But I think your question is a valid one, which is, okay, people I think are aware of many of those many of the elements of that progress, but they're still discomforted by the high prices. Now, I hate to give you a reading assignment, but I gave a speech about a week ago where I really dove into this deeply. It's on the CEA website. And one of the things I talked about is the important difference between inflation and price levels. Inflation is coming down, as I just said to the first questioner. We think it's on a reliable track to get back to where it needs to be. But there are too many prices that are still too high. And I think that's one of the reasons for the disconnect that you described, for some of the negative vibes that you described. And I have 3 words for people who feel the way you just said, which is, we hear you. The president hears you. The vice president hears you. We will never stand here and say, oh, no, you're wrong. Look at the GDP statistics. That's not the way it works. That's not President Biden's orientation. We believe that people are the best arbiters of how they experience this economy. And that's why we're working so aggressively on an agenda to help them cut costs in all the areas I ticked through before, to make investments in key areas, particularly in places that have long been left behind and hollowed out by irresponsible trade policy. And you see this president working very hard to reverse that. So we hear you. We're working hard to address those issues, and we're having some success, particularly in some of the areas that we've legislated. If you look at prescription drugs, if you look at health coverage, obviously the junk fee agenda, even on groceries, where the president has leaned hard into nudging companies who have achieved some savings on their input costs to pass those savings forward to consumers in the form of lower costs. And if we were here talking a year and a half ago, we would have had grocery inflation that was double digits. This morning it was about 1% year over year, and there are a number of items within there where we actually have deflation, falling prices of some groceries. So more work to do there, but I think that's the essence of the disconnect.
Jared Bernstein chairs the White House Council of Economic Advisors at today's White House briefing. Both President Biden and Vice President Harris putting out statements touting that 19 million new small business applications have been filed since the start of the Biden-Harris administration. They call that a record number. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 242, NASDAQ up 4, S&P up 20. Story from WFLA News Radio. Former President Donald Trump has cast his ballot ahead of next week's primary election in Florida. The Republican presidential nominee early voted this afternoon in Palm Beach before heading to a campaign rally in North Carolina. Donald Trump had long spoken out against voting anyway, but in person on Election Day, claiming voter fraud. But his campaign is now promoting early voting and vote by mail. That was from WFLA News Radio. Former President Donald Trump spoke to reporters for a few minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Great honor to vote. They've done a fantastic job here, and we appreciate it. We think we're doing very well. We just had a poll that shows we're doing very well, and we have an interesting couple of months ahead of us. I'm going to North Carolina right now. We're going to speak on the economy. It's basically a speech on what's going on with our economy. It's gone very bad under this group of people with inflation, with the economy itself, and so many other things. The other thing we're going to talk a little bit on is crime. If you look at the migrant crime in New York, it's been out of control, and it is everywhere, as I predicted a long time ago. And we'll be talking a little bit about crime and all of the people that have come into our country illegally, millions and millions. I think it's close to 20 million, maybe it's more than 20 million. And they shouldn't have been allowed to come here. It's causing a tremendous problem. It's causing death. And just it's been a horror show. Nobody's seen anything like it, and it's only going to get worse. They should not have allowed this to happen to our country. With that being said, I'm leaving for right now North Carolina. Do you have a question?
Yes, sir. What has the FBI told you about the hack on your campaign?
Well, they're looking at it, and they're doing it very professionally, and it looks like it's Iran doing it, because Iran is no friend of mine, and a lot of bad signals get sent. But it looks like it's Iran doing it, and the reason is because I was strong on Iran, and I was protecting people in the Middle East that maybe they aren't so happy about that. So that's what it seems to be, Iran.
Is that what the FBI told you specifically, that it was Iran?
I don't want to say exactly, but it was Iran.
And you said Harris's crowd sizes were AI and that there weren't people there. There's all kinds of video evidence and people who were there who have proven that false. Can you tell us about why you made that claim?
Well, I can't say what was there, who was there. I can only tell you about ours. We have the biggest crowds ever in the history of politics. We have crowds that nobody's ever seen before, and we continue to have that. We have a level of enthusiasm that nobody's seen before. They want to make America great again. That's what's happening. We're going to make it great again. Right now, we have a failing nation. We're in a failing nation, and become in many ways a third world nation, and we're not going to let that happen. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Former President Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee this year, in West Palm Beach, Florida, after voting early. The early voting time period in Florida is August 10th through 17th. The Florida primary is August 20th. And as Donald Trump said, he planned to hold a campaign rally in Asheville, North Carolina, talking about the economy. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, will be in Raleigh, North Carolina on Friday, also giving what her campaign says is a major speech on her economic agenda. Her campaign also announcing today that she, the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, plus Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, and Minnesota's First Lady, Gwen Walz, will be doing a bus tour of Western Pennsylvania next week. That all in conjunction with the Democratic National Convention being held in Chicago. This is Washington Today. And now back to President Joe Biden at the White House Creator Economy Conference. The White House describes it as the first ever event hosted by the White House's Office of Digital Strategy that will convene a group of digital creators and industry professionals to discuss the most pressing issues within the creator economy today, including privacy, fair pay, AI, mental health, and more. News reports say there were about 100 creators there. It was held in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, and President Biden stopped by.
You are the future. You are the future. And to my grandchildren ranging in age from 30 down to, well, the little ones aren't watching it, but to 14, you are the source of their news. And more people want to go into your business than the other these days. What do you think when I retire? Where do you think I'm going? I got contacts, man. You don't think I'm kidding. Anyway, look, my staff tells me that the creator economy is valued at $250 billion. I'd like to talk to you about borrowing some money from you all. And that is expected to double in the next few years. You know, folks, look, you're tired of hearing me talk about it, but I talk about these inflection points in history, how history gets changed by mostly technology, and it changes it drastically. And think about it. Think about, I wonder if any of you, when you started in this side of the equation, you thought it's going to have the consequence it has. I really mean it. Think about it. It's staggering. And they're changing not only what people listen to and what they put their faith in, but what they're doing, they're also changing the idea of what's consequential and where they go and you know, one of the things that I found, at least as I've tried to stay current, is that you all understand that you have an obligation to record what you think is true and say what you think is true. But we, you know, we've kind of divided into competing camps. Now I know I only look like I'm 40. You can smile. Okay, but I've been around a long time, and it's never been this bad before. I don't mean the press. I mean the way we treat each other in politics, and it's literally getting incredibly difficult to count the number of lies people hear. They don't know what to believe. They don't know what to count on. But you break through. You break through in ways that I think are going to change the entire dynamic of the way in which we communicate. And that's why I invited you to the White House, because I'm looking for a job.
President Joe Biden at the White House Creator Economy Conference held in the Eisenhower Executive Office building next to the White House. From a CNBC article, the content creation industry has exploded in recent years with the rise of influencer marketing, e-commerce, and social media sites that enable creators to monetize their work on the platform. Goldman Sachs in 2023 estimated that the creator economy represented a roughly $250 billion revenue opportunity, and that it was set to grow to roughly $480 billion by 2027. Roughly 50 million people globally work as content creators, Goldman estimated. The U.S. Census Bureau does not track social media as a separate industry. That was from CNBC. From the Minnesota Reformer, U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar staved off another primary election challenge from former Minneapolis City Councilman Don Samuels on Tuesday, according to unofficial primary election results. Omar's win is a victory for Minneapolis progressives as well as opponents of Israel's war in Gaza. Pro-Israel activists successfully ousted 2 squad members in Democratic primaries in recent months, but Omar will likely return to Washington for another term given nominal opposition in the November election. Samuels lost to Omar in the 2022 primary election by about 2 percentage points, and this year made the case that her headline-grabbing advocacy is leaving Minneapolis without competent leadership to address problems facing constituents. Omar's margin of victory will be larger than 2022, according to preliminary results. That was from the Minnesota Reformer. And the unofficial results from the state's Secretary of State office, Ilhan Omar, 56.2% of the vote, and Don Samuels, 42.9%. Congresswoman Omar spoke to her supporters Tuesday night in Minneapolis.
We run the politics of joy. That's right. Because we know it is joyful to fight for your neighbor. We know it is joyful to make sure everybody has access to health care. We know it is joyful to make sure housing is a human right. We know it is joyful to fight for health care to be a human right. We know it is joyful to want to live in a peaceful and equitable world. So I am incredibly honored by this victory. I am honored to represent the people who welcome me and my family as refugees. That's right, sis. This campaign has been one of the ugliest, most disgusting campaign against me that I have ever witnessed. We had an opponent that was willing to align with literal Nazis in order to defeat us. We had an opponent that weaponized and scandalized my husband, my daughter, my dead father. And I hope that they reflect in the shameful way they decided to divide our district and the incredible people we are grateful to represent.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, at her primary victory party Tuesday night in Minneapolis. The candidate she defeated, former city councilman Don Samuels, gave a concession speech at his own election watch party.
Even tonight, on this tragic loss, I have a deep sense of gratitude to have been afforded the privilege to have participated in the American democratic process in an effort to make our union more perfect, to make our district more well-served, to hear the voice of the unheard, to amplify the voices of the muted, to go to places where people feel neglected and let them know they are seen and heard. It is a privilege that I cannot put a value on, neither can a victory crown. It is only crowned by the knowledge that we have done a service to our fellow human beings. We've made the world in that process a better place because we ran a good and decent race. And we are going to continue this work because the race was not our lives. It is our lives that created this race. And our lives will go on. And the work will go on. And so a victory has been won tonight. A victory that says we have been defeated for a moment, but we are in a race that cannot be lost.
A headline at USA Today, Ilhan Omar wins in Minnesota. A Wisconsin Senate fight is set. 3 takeaways from Tuesday's primaries. Joining us now is the co-author of the article, Ken Tran, Congress and campaigns reporter for USA Today. Thank you for being with us. Let's start in Minnesota. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar defeating challenger Don Samuels, a rematch, a progressive squad member surviving a primary challenge. Why her and not the others?
Yeah, so Ilhan Omar easily won her primary last night. She won by over 16,000 votes, which was much more than her last race in 2022, where she won against Samuels with a rematch race by just under 2,500 votes. So a much more decisive victory this time around because of several factors, right? One, she ran a much more active campaign this cycle. The campaign this election said that they weren't going to take this race for granted anymore. She also had a huge fundraising advantage over Samuels, big money advantage, which was only helped by the lack of spending from AIPAC, a big, powerful pro-Israel group that has already taken out two members of the Progressive Squad, Reps Jamal Bowman of New York and Cori Bush of Missouri, for voicing criticisms of Israel's policy in the Israel-Hamas war. But they didn't get involved in the race this time around. They haven't specified why, but there are several factors in this race that boosted Omar's chances of winning significantly this time.
And the second takeaway involving the Wisconsin Senate seat.
Yeah, so Eric Hovde, we expected him to win his primary. He easily did that. Last night, he was backed by former President Donald Trump, National Republicans, the National Republican Senatorial Committee. So he was one of their star recruits. They're really excited about him because Republicans see this election cycle as one of their best chances ever to reclaim the upper chamber. So he will take on Senator Tammy Baldwin, who's running for a third term. And she's seen as one of the most vulnerable Democratic incumbents this cycle because while she won re-election in 2018 by around over 10 percentage points, President Joe Biden won that state, Wisconsin, by under 1 point. So Republicans see this as a very winnable race in an election cycle where there are several Democratic incumbents running in vulnerable states, such as Senator Jon Tester in Montana, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. This is just one of several races that we are going to see determine control of the Senate.
Has that race changed with Kamala Harris now becoming the Democratic presidential nominee instead of Joe Biden?
It probably does. It certainly, we haven't seen specific polling since Harris has taken the nomination because it's so soon after. But if we're seeing the enthusiasm levels from Harris's campaign and the enthusiasm from Democrats across the board, lawmakers, it certainly won't be a damper on the campaign as some Democrats sort of fretted about Joe Biden on other down-ballot races. So if there was a concern, it likely won't be a concern anymore with a lot more enthusiasm behind Harris.
We're talking with Ken Tran from USA Today. The third takeaway, staying in Wisconsin, a House race.
Yeah, so we saw small business owner Rebecca Cook win the Democratic nomination for this race in Wisconsin's 3rd congressional district, which is currently held by a freshman lawmaker, Derek Van Orden, Republican lawmaker. So in this race, Cook ran as this political outsider up against a state assembly member, Katrina Shankland. And this was a race where it was sort of a political outsider versus someone that she sought to frame as someone that's a career politician. Cook was backed by the Blue Dog Coalition and the New Democrat Coalition. Both of these groups are made up of centrist and moderate House Democrats, very more pragmatic focused lawmakers. And this race, while a lot of the competitive House races this election cycle are viewed as to be in New York and California, Democrats are hoping Van Orden's seat could give them an opening. One, because he's a freshman lawmaker. He won his election in 2022 by around under 4 percentage points. And they see multiple vulnerabilities in Van Orden. One, he did attend Trump's Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. He says he didn't enter the Capitol, but he was there at that rally on January 6th. He also had this incident last year where he yelled at Senate pages, these high school students that get to work in the Senate for some time, for taking pictures of the rotunda. So those two moments are just a couple examples of possible campaign vulnerabilities that Democrats might see in this district.
And finally, as we're a couple of months away from the general election, how is it shaping up? Which party will control the House and the Senate when it's all finished?
Yeah, so with the Senate, a lot of the expectation is that Republicans will take it because they have a tailwind behind them. Democrats are largely playing defense this cycle. Most of the seats up for re-election, the competitive seats up for re-election, are held by Democrats. Like I mentioned before, in Montana, very Republican-leaning state, but held by Jon Tester, a Democrat. Ohio, a state that's been trending Republican, held by a Democrat. Nevada, too. Senator Jackie Rosen is in that state. That's a more battleground purple state. So there are several seats that are currently held by Democrats that they have to play defense on. And when Republicans have to flip just 2 seats in a 51-49 majority in the Senate, they're feeling pretty good with so many opportunities to pick up new Senate seats. In the House, it's sort of a 50-50 coin toss with so many of these competitive races in New York and California. A lot of them are held by Republicans, but they're feeling pretty good. I mean, Republicans control the House with just the narrowest of majorities that we've seen that have made it hard to govern, which Democrats are hoping that they can capitalize on in this election, sort of portraying this Republican majority in the House as a dysfunctional, unserious governing group. But Republicans are feeling good with President Trump at the top of the ticket, especially after he's been polling still neck and neck in this presidential race.
Ken Tran, Congress and campaigns reporter for USA Today. You can find his articles at usatoday.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Washington Today continues in a moment.
Hi, I'm Susan Swain. Campaign 2024 has evolved in some unexpected ways. And from now until Election Day, C-SPAN promises you unfiltered coverage of the candidates as they battle to win the White House and Congress. You may not know that C-SPAN is a private company that operates without a dime of government money. And like many media organizations, we've been impacted by cord cutting. This summer, we are asking for you to help support our unbiased political coverage with a donation. Here's the good news. 100% of your contribution, large or small, directly supports C-SPAN operations. And best of all, an anonymous donor has pledged to match your donation dollar for dollar up to $25,000. You can find out more at cspan.org/donate. Help ensure that C-SPAN's unique, long-form coverage of politics is here to stay. Visit cspan.org/donate. Thank you for watching, and thanks so much for your support.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Story from Reuters. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said on Wednesday he would step down next month, succumbing to public disaffection over political scandals and rising living costs that marred his 3-year term and setting off a scramble to replace him. The Liberal Democratic Party will hold a contest in September to replace him as president of the party and, by extension, as prime minister. Kishida's ratings dipped after he took office in 2021 following revelations about the LDP's ties to the controversial Unification Church. His popularity took another hit when a slush fund of unrecorded political donations made at LDP fundraising events came to light. Some of the reporting from Reuters. The prime minister made his announcement in Tokyo at a news conference.
LDP will change, or newborn LDP, that will be shown very clearly to the Japanese people, and that is quite important for our party. For that, transparent and open election for the leaders, and also free and active discussion would be a prerequisite. When we do that, we need to show LDP will change, and the very easy to understand first step for us is that I step down as the leader of LDP. I am not going to run for the forthcoming leader election for LDP. Through the election, I would like to support the newborn leader as one of the members of the LDP.
The interpreter for the Japanese Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, at his news conference today, that audio coming from the Prime Minister's office. The U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel, posting, under Prime Minister Kishida's steadfast leadership, Japan and the United States have ushered in a new era of relations for the alliance. Working side by side with President Biden, Prime Minister Kishida help build a lattice work of security alliances and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific region that will stand the test of time. And at today's State Department briefing in Washington, the deputy spokesperson Vedant Patel asked about the resignation.
Can I get your reaction to Prime Minister Kishida's announcement that he will not run in next month's LDP leadership election, and what are U.S. expectations of Japan's next leadership?
So let me answer the second part first. the leadership and the governance of Japan is, of course, up to the Japanese people to determine, and I have no doubt that whoever ends up assuming that position and office, that we will continue to deepen our alliance and partnership with Japan. Let me just say about Prime Minister Kishida, he has been an extraordinary friend to the United States, and we deeply appreciate his steadfast partnership and his visionary leadership. Under his leadership, the Japan and U.S. alliance has been brought to greater heights, and it is truly evolved into a global partnership where we stand shoulder to shoulder with each other, promoting our shared values and interests. His April visit to Washington, D.C., where he met with the president, where he spoke to Congress, very clearly highlighted this, and we were very proud to work with Prime Minister Kishida on during his tenure at the G7, as well as issues surrounding condemning Russia's war against Ukraine.
U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel at his news conference. New York Times article reads the Liberal Democrats have held an iron grip on Parliament for all but 4 years since 1955, but decades of scandals and its inability to tackle many of Japan's deep-rooted challenges have spurred widespread voter dissatisfaction. Even though polls have revealed the Japanese public's deep discontent with the governing party, it only rarely appears at the ballot box. Low voter turnout and weak political opposition in Japan have left the Liberal Democratic Party largely insulated from the pressure of potentially losing a general election. That was from the New York Times. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel also asked today about another New York Times article that reads, Hunter Biden sought assistance from the U.S. government for a potentially lucrative energy project in Italy while his father was vice president, according to newly released records and interviews. The records, which the Biden administration had withheld for years, indicate that Hunter Biden wrote at least one letter to the U.S. ambassador to Italy in 2016, seeking assistance for the Ukrainian gas company Burisma, where he was a board member. That was the New York Times article. Here's the question to the State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel.
Hunter Biden's legal team has confirmed that he reached out to the U.S. ambassador to Italy when his father, the current president, was vice president, about potentially closing a lucrative deal for Burisma. Do you have any information on that? Can you confirm that what Hunter Biden's legal team is saying, that there was no meeting, nothing productive came from that outreach?
So, look, I will, the department would defer to Mr. Biden's representatives on any questions as it relates to his correspondence. I will say that the documents that you're referring to were released as part of an ongoing Freedom of Information Act request, and as consistent with longstanding department policy, we will be, those documents will be made available to the public in the coming weeks. We do not have any additional perspective to offer on the production of these documents, given that it is tied up and as part of ongoing litigation. But broadly, let me just say, individuals from all over the world and from varying sectors seek counsel, advice, information from our ambassadors and principal officers at our embassies and consulates around the world. The department takes every responsibility to evaluate those requests on their merits, and we act appropriately.
And on those documents, the timing, the New York Times has been seeking them for quite a while. They were only released after the president announced he won't seek re-election. Is there anything to that timing? And the initial letter from Hunter Biden was never released by the State Department. Will the document be made available?
I would not read into anything into the timing. These FOIA processes are long, robust processes, and they are frankly independent of what else is happening in the world, but I'm happy to check if we've got anything else to offer on the timeline.
Vedant Patel is the State Department deputy spokesperson. Another Reuters article, Hamas said on Wednesday it would not take part in a new round of Gaza ceasefire talks slated for Thursday in Qatar, but an official briefed on the talks said mediators expected to consult with the Palestinian group afterwards. The U.S. has said it expects indirect talks to go ahead as planned in Qatar's capital Doha on Thursday, and that a ceasefire agreement was still possible, while warning that progress was needed urgently to avert a wider war. 3 senior Iranian officials have said that only a ceasefire deal in Gaza would hold Iran back from direct retaliation against Israel for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh on its soil last month. That was the article from Reuters. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre asked about this.
A top Hamas official told AP in an interview today that the group is losing faith with the ability of the United States to broker a ceasefire in Gaza. How do you restore that faith?
So look, we expect, just to give an update on what we expect to see tomorrow, obviously this week, we expect these talks to move forward as planned. Director Burns and Brett McGurk will both travel to Qatar for these discussions. There's always a lot of public posturing in advance. We've seen that before. It's not new of these talks, and I'm not going to certainly weigh in on any of that, just like I'm not going to discuss the details of the negotiation from this podium. We do not negotiate in public, so we're not going to do that. Our view continues to be that it is critical that we reach a deal. It is important that we do so. The resumption of talks on Thursday is an important step. It is an important step to continue that. We need to release the hostages. As you all know, some of those hostages are American hostages. We need to make sure that lasting relief delivered to Palestinian civilians in Gaza and lower the tension in the region. We've said this many times before. This hostage deal, this ceasefire deal, this end of war will help lower tensions in the region. And so that's what the deal is going to do, and that's what we want to see. The United States is going to be there tomorrow, and we are ready. We are ready to continue these discussions. And as I've said before, and as my colleagues from NSC have said many times before, we are working 24/7 around the clock to get this done, to get this deal done.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at today's White House news conference. From the Times of Israel, visiting Beirut, U.S. Special Envoy to the region Amos Hochstein warned Wednesday the clock was ticking for a hostage ceasefire deal between Israel and the Hamas terror group in Gaza that could also help end 10 months of cross-border exchanges between Israel and the Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon.
Good morning, everyone. When I was last in Lebanon, which was in June, I stood here and I told everyone that I believe that the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel has gone on for long enough, and that diplomatic resolution was both achievable and it was urgent. I think that was true in June, and sadly, it is still very true today. We continue to believe that a diplomatic resolution is achievable because we continue to believe that no one truly wants a full-scale war between Lebanon and Israel, especially not the Lebanese people and the Israeli people. We know it's urgent because the hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel have only escalated since I was here last. Speaker Berry and I had a good conversation about the situation in Lebanon and the need to escalate tensions across the blue line and across the region. President Biden has been working tirelessly to do exactly that, including through an immediate ceasefire and hostage release deal, and he's asked me to come back to Lebanon ahead of the renewed talks this week. Speaker Berry and I also talked about the framework agreement that's on the table for a Gaza ceasefire, and he and I agreed there is no more time to waste, and there's no more valid excuses from any party for any further delay. The deal would also help enable a diplomatic resolution here in Lebanon, and that would prevent an outbreak of a wider war and create the conditions for the displaced Lebanese people to return to their homes in the south and the displaced Israeli residents to return to their homes in their north. Both should be able to do that with safety and security. We have to take advantage of this window for diplomatic action and diplomatic solutions. That time is now.
U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein today at a news conference statement took one question in Beirut, Lebanon. Sky News reports that Iran's president has told Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, retaliation against Israel is a right during a rare phone call as part of international efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East. The president told the Prime Minister a punitive response to an aggressor is a right of nations and a solution for stopping crimes and aggression, Iran's official RNA news agency reported. Today is the 12th anniversary of the abduction of American journalist Austin Tice in Syria. President Biden putting out a statement. We have repeatedly pressed the government of Syria to work with us so we can at last bring Austin home. Today, I once again call for his immediate release. The freedom of the press is essential, and journalists like Austin play a critical role in informing the public and holding those in power accountable. And Congressman Michael McCaul, Republican of Texas, chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, with his statement, today marks 12 years since Austin Tice, a former U.S. Marine, freelance journalist, and Texan, was taken hostage by the Assad regime. While authoritarian regimes continue this disturbing trend of taking American citizens hostage, Austin has languished as Assad's prisoner. The United States will never give up on freeing every last one of our citizens who are held hostage or wrongfully detained around the world. Austin must be unconditionally released now so he can be reunited with his family. That was from Congressman Michael McCaul. The National Press Club in Washington held a program titled Concert for Austin Tice. It had some speeches and country music singer Scotty Hastings. Here's the National Press Club President Emily Wilkins.
Today, we recognize a major and sobering step in the long journey home for Austin Tice. 12 years ago today, Austin was taken in Syria, where he was working as a journalist. Today, we call on our American government to bring him home to his family, because all Austin was doing was journalism, and journalism is not a crime. Austin's journey has been long. No journalist has been held longer than Austin Tice. But we have seen what our government is capable of doing. We saw it just a few weeks ago when Evan Gershkovich and Alsu Krimasheva were brought home to their families. But we got to finish the job. Austin is now the only journalist remaining, and we here at the National Press Club will not stop fighting until he is back home.
National Press Club President Emily Wilkins, a CNBC correspondent at today's program at the Press Club in Washington. Story from the Washington Post. In 1908, a white mob incited a race riot in Springfield, Illinois, leaving several people dead, hundreds injured, and dozens of black-owned businesses and homes burned and destroyed. On Friday, President Joe Biden will designate a national monument to commemorate the violent event, the White House confirmed to the Washington Post on Wednesday. Biden aiming to bolster his record on racial justice as he prepares to leave office in January, will sign the designation proclamation during an event at the White House with civil rights leaders and Illinois lawmakers. It also follows the fatal July 6th shooting of Sonia Massey, 36-year-old unarmed black woman in South Springfield, by an Illinois sheriff's deputy. That was from the Washington Post. Today is the 116th anniversary of the race riot in Springfield, Illinois. A couple of years ago, C-SPAN's American History TV drove around that city with historian Catherine Harris talking about what happened and why there has not been a memorial put up until now.
In the years following, what did Springfield do, or what?
Nothing. Nothing was done.
Why do you think it wasn't being?
Shame, shame, shame. A race riot in the home of Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abraham Lincoln. We don't want anybody to know about that. I'm sure that's why. You know, it's a black spot, a black spot on Springfield's history. Whoever would have thought that there would be a race riot in the home of Mr. Lincoln? That would be the last place. And plus, it was in the North. You usually associate race riots to be in the South and lynchings in the South, but no. This was in the North. You know, it says we should remember our history, or else we are condemned or something like that to repeat it. Because I hope that we would never get to the state or get to the stage in Springfield where something like that would happen again.
Historian Catherine Harris on C-SPAN's American History TV in Springfield, Illinois in 2019. Today is the 116th anniversary of that deadly race riot in the city. And also today, the White House said that President Biden on Friday will designate a national monument marking that event. The Washington Post article says that 4 lawmakers from Illinois, 3 Democrats, 1 Republican, introduced legislation to create the national monument under the National Park Service, but the measure has stalled amid gridlock on Capitol Hill in an election year. and that President Biden will bypass the gridlock by using his executive authority under the Antiquities Act, a 1906 law that authorizes the president to protect lands and waters for the benefit of all Americans. That was from the Washington Post. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. If you subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, Word for Word, you'll get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. You can sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.